ngiyabulisa kuni bamameli nababukeli emakhaya. Babukeli last week njengoba nikhumbula besikhuluma ngomehluko between spiritual leadership ne religious leadership. We covered points ezibalulekile that a spiritual leader should possess. We covered interconnectedness. Ukuthi umuntu o spiritual funeka abe noxhumano with themselves ne creator yabo. Ngumuntu ne principles, ngumuntu who's authentic, nomuntu futhi who lives for a purpose. Sithile last week ukuthi sizawuqhubeka ngayo le topic. So this week we focus kakhulu go spiritual leadership but from an African perspective. Sawufunda nje kancinci nge research esinikwe ngu Dr. Penelope Low. Uthi u Dr. Penelope Low, most of the literature on spiritual leadership theories has been predominantly conceptualized within a Western paradigm. Spiritual leadership literature from an Eastern perspective has recently emerged. So uyachaza apha uDr. Low ukuthi kakhulukazi i-research bezenziwa bekwenza i-research kufocus on the Western side, the spiritual aspect of the Western side, and siyabona apho ukuthi maybe the African spirituality ibingahoywa kakhulu. Uthi apha, however, there remains a dearth of literature focusing on spiritual leadership from an African perspective. It is therefore critical to realize that the notion of spiritual leadership is also appropriate and relevant in an African context.
So now, today's focus is on African spiritual leadership from an African perspective, which I like that most of the literature on spiritual leadership theories has been predominantly conceptualized within a Western paradigm. So it means that part of a problem is now today, where I say the mental slavery, spiritual confusion, black jealousy, it's a big problem yabantu abamnyama. Hence abantu abamnyama bengathandi or accept to be led ngomunye umuntu omnyama, badelela bahloniphi. And also today we understand through this study that because of that, but also because of a lot of information ekhoyo on literature research, is that leadership, spiritual leadership, sichazwe ngabelungu. Because when we talk about Western, we talk ngabelungu. Si explainwe ngabelungu. Indlela engi understand ngayo is that uma umuntu omnyama in a leadership position, any position, but to focus now on spiritual position, abantu abamnyama ukuthi bakwamkele leadership yakho, bayivume leadership yakho, bayipraise, basebenzele lo gama, leadership yakho, is when umnyama but leader in a way engathi yabelungu. Because leadership, spiritual leadership, in the African context, thina abantu abamnyama esingayibheka sithi na leadership right ichithiwe, akubhalwanga okuningi ngayo. So kahle in conclusion of this le ebhalwe la, it means that leadership today in all avenues is known ngendlela yase West. Uma uyileader as umuntu omnyama, uleader ngendlela yase Africa okhokho nangendlela thina esiphiwe ngayo, abantu abayi-accept bayibona kuyi-bad leadership.
Kunjalo tata. I think hence why ngizayenza umzekelo nje tata ukuthi in a lot of cases sibona abaprofeti bakwantu babephikwa belwiswa. I think a classic example would be imbonikazi uNongqawuse, where till this day kune division kuphikiswa ngobumbonikazi bakhe. Namhlanje abantu bayaphikisa ukuthi na kwakungumuntu kamoya na wayethunyelwe, because studies kakhulu they were focused on the Western. Thina abantu abamnyama were never included kwezi researches ukuthi us as black people okanye abantu bethu in leadership positions could actually possess spirituality.
Actually njengoba ukhuluma manje wenza example noNgqawuse, now I'm getting another example. And it's simple, traditional leadership. Remember that part of why traditional leadership rejectwa amakhosi ahliswa and konke kathatha this western kind of leadership was that i-traditional leadership i-abusive. You know, having umuntu afika azoguqa phambi kwakho, to the western world that is worship. It amounts to worshiping. Kuthiwa idol worshiping. So kubona nje it's a no. Umuntu une rights. Why should aguqe phambi kwakho? That is why we see ukuthi recently we had one of inkosi zakwantu eboshwa according the way we understand ngakhona. I stand to be corrected. Wayeboshelwa indlela wayenza ngayo mandulo ekudala ngesikhathi bephethe amakhosi. Where remember that before the colonizers arrived, Jan van Riebeeck, we had no jail systems. Jail ifike Jan van Riebeeck 1652, at least like South Africa, Cape of Good Hope. Before that, besingana jail it because jail it dangerous, especially lezabo mawungaye Cape of Good Hope ka Jan van Riebeeck. Wawufakwa nje endaweni emnyama uboshwe ngamachaina uhlala uyi-1. Yayingakubulala physically, ayikubulala psychologically. Ayikubulala psychologically, create an anger. Up to today, I mean, the jail system, it's another issue, but subject to another day. Any event, under the traditional leadership and traditional laws. Bekunindlela yabo, ama-court awekhona phansi kwesihlahla, i-judge was the king, and then after that, ubushaywa, ubuhlawuliswa. There was forms of punishment and discipline. But why is it that abantu abafika kwenye ilizwe came ezweni lethu and then bachitha nje all our systems and viewed i-systems zethu as barbaric, viewed i-systems zethu as ukuthi azilunganga, sikhonza umuntu and this and that. So now it's clear here yokuthi the reason why sila sikhona today is abantu abamnyama now not umlungu. We are not accepting a traditional leadership. Abantu abamnyama abayifuni traditional leadership, bayibona nje barbaric. Emasontweni ethu thina abantu abamnyama kwinkonzo zethu zakwantu masonto amnyama not inkonzo biyaphesheya. How do we do things thina emasontweni ethu? Because remember that emasontweni ethu zabantu abamnyama into ezihamba phambili still seyizinhlonipho nento ezicishe ifane nalezo. But if you look in today's context, masijajwa sizawujajwa against the Western Church, which Western Church carries a lot of elements of leadership yase West, not in leadership yase Africa. Example today, if umphathi webandla or izinto zezomoya umuntu yaguqa izawuviewwa by other black people amakholwa futhi as idol worshiping. Niyamworshipa lo mfundisi, niyamworshipa lo mprofeti, nimenzani. But they forget ukuthi thina, remember, though sikicala lo moya, we still fall under African religion, meaning that leadership yethu on traditional affairs, leadership yethu on spiritual matters, leadership yethu in business, in all aspects, will always carry that Africanism kuyona. You know, whatever we will do, i-well yethu, i-source of well yethu, umthombo wethu will be Africanism. So kwenza izinto ki-leadership zethu in the African perspective. But here is the problem, as Dr. Low eyibeka like start, is that a lot of indlela thina abantu abamnyama sasihola ngayo ikhahlele abelungu zange bayibhali, instead babhalile, but babhala ngendlela bona abantu abamhlophe aba-understanda ngayo leadership yase West. And this is very painful, Palisa, because clearly today when you do research, Google research ayikho enough. You need to go deep, because a lot of research izakubonisa abantu abamhlophe bebhala izitori zethu. Now ababhalanga nje bona as eyewitnesses, babhale bafaka indlela bona as abantu baphesheya ababona ngayo izinto. Example, incwadi yenkosi uShaka. We know that many books were written uShaka, many movies were made, but most were inaccurate. Until now, a writer stood up and said, no, amanga lento, I need to correct this. Wayibhala ngendlela yenzeka ngayo yes Africa. And when we look at that book, which anginayo, and I would really recommend it to our listeners. Incwadi kaShaka enje. When I look at that book and I look at the history we knew ngoShaka before, yes, there are similarities, but okunye nje is totally opposite, because babengabhali nje ngoShaka, babebhala ngomqondo wabo. You know, example are just flowing now. Now I remember stories ka Ntsikana. Mabebhala stories ka Ntsikana bathi uNtsikana wayesemgidini, and mabesibhala bathi kumuntu wayegida kakhulu. Now umuntu osebenza ngezimo zomoya in the African context uyazi ukuthi mawuphiwe kakhulu ukugida, you are no longer just a normal person, you go into a trance. Uyakhe trance. So already mabethu uNtsikana wayegida kakhulu, ingichazelani mina umuntu omoya lonto, ingichaza uNtsikana kusho ukuthi bingumuntu vele bephiwe, because ugida siyagida sonke normally, but once in those days ugide kakhulu, angikhulumi ngokujiva kwamanje, into zesintu, ungena ke trance. It means that there was something spiritual about uNtsikana. And then incwadi lebhalwa abantu abamhlophe ithi the day wayebizwa uNtsikana waphuma early, zakuvuma ukuthi agide that day. You see, already ubonani lapho, ubona ukuthi manje ikukhona laba sisa khona umbhali.
Bayahlukanisa lanto ukuthi uNtsikana could have had spiritual,
the African spiritual gift. Actually they are trying to show us that lento yogida amademoni. That's why that day, because lilanga le calling yakhe, that's why that day uNtsikana zange zakuvuma gide. Why zakuvuma gide? Because ebezohlelwa ngomunye umoya, ebezohlelwa yenye religion abayifavorayo. Then it says waphuma wahamba early, I think, and that day wayenesithembu. Now isithembu ayo girlfriend, isithembu kokwantu yinto esemthethweni kwantu, ayo girlfriend, ayo ngumakhwapheni, ayisosono, yinto evumelekile mayenzwe proper. But that day ingathi that day, I don't remember exactly, but ingathi wahlukana or wayezohlukana with the second wife. Iya kuphi? Iya kwinkolo yabo ethi umuntu akavumelekanga ngoba nabafazi more than one.
Kodwa kuthana into tata ukuthi I think wayiphuma emgidini but zangaxhense ngalomini. I think wathi mayesuka wayemlanjeni eyohlamba imbolo, wayiqabe imbolo.
Yeah, exactly. In steps oqala sithathayo akagidi 1. 2 uyohlamba imbola by viewer as a baptism. Kuthiwa ibaptism. But le baptism akuthiwa nje ubaptizing. They are clear ukuthi uhlambe imbola. Why kuthi imbola ihlambe? Because to them again, I understand imbola kithi as African people imeleni. Mawufaka imbola, I'm not talking about the sunscreen. Khuluma ngembola. That's why umkhwetha ma intabeni ufaka imbola. That's why isangoma masithwasa naso kuthiwa ngumkhwetha. In that stage sifaka imbola. Mawuthonga abantu abafika kuwe bafika ngesinye isikhathi bekhona abafake imbola bemhlophe. That's why kuthiwa amathamba amhlophe. So imbola is a spiritual significance kumuntu omnyama. Now you see mayiphuma kuthiwa uhlamba lento bona abangayi understand yokuthi sifakelana imbola, kuthiwa uyayihlamba lento, because now uNtsikana is going now to be converted. Uzawuphuma kubuyedini, uzawuphuma kwinkolo yamademoni, kwinkolo kaSathana, that is inkolo yakwantu yomuntu omnyama. Uzawungena ke kwinkolo yabe ebuyaphesheya ekuyiyo indlela eya ezulwini. Now when you read that story kaNtsikana, already it demonizes inkolo zethu, and it really makes sense lento kulesi study yokuthi a lot of literature ezibhaliwe nge-African spiritual leadership zibhalwe ngabalungu bezibhala nge-leadership yaphesheya. No, it's very interesting. I think sifunde nje umlaleli just very few words. Asikayiqali lento. Sizawuqhubeka next week because it's interesting, it's too long, idinga sikhulume. Sikhuluma lana nge-African spiritual leadership. Siyabonga.